All right, sixth graders, this is Mrs. Brown, and we are starting Bend 2. And I know that in Bend 1, you focused on character traits and how all of the different implications of characters internally as well as what's going on from other characters externally can really cause a lot of issues and really create situations. Well, what we're going to be talking about in Bend 2 is the setting. Setting is where and when something happens. Mostly the where seems to be the big deal, but when also affects it. So we are going to do another read aloud. It comes from the same book that Popularity came from. We have the same main character, Will, and the author is Adam Bagdasarian, and it's called The Fight. And as I am reading this aloud to you, I want you to kind of think about where the story is happening. All right. And then we'll focus on more of that in a little bit. It began with a basketball game. Mike Dieter and I went up for the same rebound, and I accidentally stuck my elbow in his chest. Then Mike stuck his elbow in my chest, pointed a finger at me, and told me to watch out. In those days, I had a reputation for toughness to maintain, so I told him that he better watch out. And on the next rebound, neither of us watched out, and both of us got elbows in the chest. Then we started shoving each other and under the basket and pointing fingers and making threatening faces, which was fine with me because looking threatening was one of the things I did best. Before things could get out of hand, however, gym ended, and Mike and I glared at each other and went back to our respective homerooms. Things probably would have taken a peaceful turn if I hadn't walked home with Kevin Cox after school and told him that the next time Mike and I played basketball, I was really going to throw some elbows. And if he, Mike, didn't like it, I would fight him anytime, anywhere. I don't know why I said this. Perhaps I was thinking of the Mike I had known a year before. Perhaps I was thinking of the thin, gullible, good-natured Mike who had since grown 4 inches, gained 15 pounds, and become as humorless and menacing as a drill sergeant. Kevin looked at me doubtfully. Do you really think you can take him? He asked me. Since Kevin had always been one of my most loyal servile followers, I was astonished by his doubt in my physical prowess. I know I can take him, I said. He's 3 inches taller than you, Kevin said. So? He's really strong. I'm really strong. Kevin shrugged. Okay, he said, but I think Mike could take you. Now it was my turn to shrug. It was also my turn to lay a condescending hand upon Kevin's shoulder and leave him to ponder his absurd and traitorous notions. The next day in school, everything proceeded as usual. I listened to the teachers, took notes, fell asleep, made a few uncalled for remarks, and gazed at Denise Young's legs. During lunch, I was sitting with a table full of friends and talking and listening in my usual superior way, when I heard Mike Dieter say, "Hey, buddy." Somehow, I knew that he meant me. Somehow, I also knew that all kinds of jigs were up and that something momentous was going to happen. I turned to look at him. "I hear you want to fight me," he said. "That's right," I said. "I'll meet you after school." "I'll be there," I said, and then he walked away, and I discovered two interesting things about myself. The first was that the idea of fighting terrified me. And the second was that in moments of extreme fear, my body produced ice-cold sweat. Someone said something to me, and I smiled and nodded. Someone said something else to me, and I smiled and nodded at that too. Perhaps they were giving me advice. Perhaps they were telling me to stay low and lead with my left. I stood up without really knowing I was standing up and walked from the cafeteria to the playground. I had never felt so lonely or so frightened in my life. Somehow I had taken a wrong turn and wound up in the wrong day, in the wrong body, with the wrong future. Somehow, in 3 hours, I was going to be in a real fight with real fists, and there was no way out of it. My biggest problem, I knew, was that I didn't hate Mike or even dislike him. I had no animal rage to ball my hands into fists and thrust them into action, no deep-seated envy or resentment to impel me toward him with the object of destruction. All I had was fear and pride, which is a pretty poor combination as far as fighting is concerned, because all pride could do was guarantee that I show up for the fight, and all fear could do was guarantee that I lose it. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. I sat through my classes a smiling, silent shell of my former self and tried to look as casual and confident as possible. Now and then I would look up at the clock and realize that the fight was only 1 hour and 49 minutes away, 1 hour and 40 minutes. I tried to tell myself that it might only be a 1 or 2 punch fight, that maybe Mike would throw a punch and I would throw a punch and we would both smile, throw our arms around each other and become friends for life. But I knew that it would not be a 1 or 2 punch fight. No, it would be a fight to some extreme and horrifying limit, a fight to unconsciousness or hospitalization or reconstructive surgery. During my walks from class to class, I discovered that most of the 8th grade had taken sides, and that my side consisted of me, a foreign exchange student named Hans, and 2 girls whose hearts I had not yet broken. The rest of my peers were massed behind Mike, eager to see me put in my place once and for all. The last class of the day was shop. We were all told by our teacher, Mr. Bledsoe, to work on our special projects. My special project was a skateboard. So I began sanding its nose and trying with all my might not to think about the fight. It is said that there is nothing like working with wood to take one's mind off of a problem. But it could also be said that there is nothing like a problem to take one's mind off of working with wood. No matter how intensely I sanded the nose of my skateboard, the fight was always with me, and the air around me seemed as thin as alpine or Himalayan air. I tried to tell myself that in 3 hours it would all be over, that I would be in my own house, in my own room, and the fight would be a memory. But 3 hours would not be enough if I lost the fight. A month would not be enough to heal my humiliation. What would be enough? I asked myself, 6 months? No. A year? Yes, a year would be enough. In a year, I would be able to look back on this day and smile, or perhaps laugh. In a year, the fight would be a distant memory, and I would be a different person with different friends and new reasons to feel confident and proud. So I closed my eyes and asked God to please make it a year later, to please take me out of this year and place me in the next. With my eyes closed, I almost believed that time was racing past me, that eggs were being laid, chicks were being hatched, growing plump, laying their own eggs and dying. Unfortunately, when I opened my eyes, I knew that I was still 13, still in shop class, and that the fight was waiting to be fought. I thanked God anyway, guessing I had prayed the wrong prayer, looked at the clock and saw that I had 10 minutes left. I did not even try to sand my skateboard those last 10 minutes. Instead, I drifted into a pleasant state of suspended animation, where there was no joy, no fear, no pride, no regret. During this time, my pulse rate and respiration dropped. The blood in my veins slowed to a crawl, and I believe I stopped aging. And then the bell rang, and my time was up. We were to meet in front of the school. When I got there, I saw a crowd of 50 or 60 people awaiting my arrival. Under different circumstances, I would have been pleased by the turnout, but the hopelessness of my position offset whatever theatrical lift I might have felt. I did, however, smile. I was, after all, the other half of the act, and was not about to look somber or scared or penitent for anyone. I saw Mike Dieter standing 15 or 20 feet away, looking as menacing as ever. He fixed his eyes on me for a moment, then kissed his girlfriend, Linda Laban. I had foolishly broken up with Linda 10 months before. Now, as Mike was kissing her, she looked up at me as though she would soon have her revenge. And then, before I knew it, someone said, "Let's go," and everyone started walking toward the park 2 blocks away. Strangely, I felt not like a boy on his way to a fight, but like a king on his way to the gallows. These were not my classmates before me, but peasants in revolt. My wife had already been beheaded, my children sold for horses, my servants set free. I tried to put everything in perspective, to assure myself that it was only a fight, and that losing was no disgrace. And maybe I wouldn't lose. Maybe I was one of those people who did not know his own strength until he was confronted. Maybe when I was facing Mike, some inherited ancient instinct would propel me toward his throat and give me the strength of 10 men. My father was certainly a powerful man. My father at certain times was one of the most powerful and frightening men I knew. Up to that moment, all I thought I had inherited from him was his pride and his nose. But maybe once I was standing face to face with Mike Dieter, I would discover that I had inherited his blind rage and lion heart as well. When we got to the park, a short discussion about the rules of the fight took place. First, it was decided that kicking and biting should not be allowed. Then that kicking should be allowed, but not scratching. During this time, I was standing by a stone water fountain, breathing slowly and wondering when the blood of my father and his father's father was going to show itself. I still couldn't summon enough rage or fury or indignation to make me want to fight Mike or anyone else. All I could do was hope that I was subconsciously feeling those things and was merely biding my time. A fight's a fight, I heard someone say. No BS rules. This motion was contemplated, then carried. Everything allowed. No BS rules. Should we take our shirts off? I asked, hoping to postpone things a little longer. Whatever, someone said, and with that, all the decisions were made, and there was nothing for Mike and me to do but face each other and fight. Tim Hamilton, our referee, walked us to a clearing and told us to shake hands and fight whenever we were ready. For a moment, Mike and I just looked at each other. Then, Mike crouched a little. I do not know why, and began to circle me. I knew I should move in and attack immediately, but I was rooted where I stood. Fight, someone said. And now Mike began to advance and kick karate style. The kicks not only served to display his formidable kicking skills, but were also a superior defensive and offensive weapon. In order to get to Mike, I would have to find some way to get around his kicks, and in order to do that, I would have to be someone who knew how to fight. My only choice, therefore, was to look unworried and back up, which is what I did. Mike, however, was advancing steadily, which meant that I could either continue backing up until I reached the bus stop on Santa Monica Boulevard or stand my ground and see what happened. Pride demanded that I choose the latter, just in time for Mike to kick me on the thigh. I turned sideways to present a thinner target, bent my knees a little, and took a hard kick to the ribs. And then things began to happen very quickly. In an instant, Mike was on me, my legs buckled, and we were wrestling on the ground. In an effort to prove that I could fight as dirty as anyone, I gingerly grabbed his groin and discovered that I had neither the will nor the strength to squeeze. So that's how you want to play, Mike said, grabbing my groin a good deal less gingerly and wrestling me onto my back. Somehow I was able to get out from under him, and a great deal of grappling, kicking, scratching, and punching ensued while the crowd yelled for either Mike or me to do something that I could not quite make out. Then I saw blood on my shirt and wondered who was bleeding. Before I could find out, Mike was on top of me and my arms were pinned under his knees, and he was hitting me very hard in the face. Curiously, I hardly felt the punches. All I felt was the dull impact of the blows. And all I heard were the shrieks and hollers of the crowd, along with the thump, thump, thump of fist hitting cheek, ear, chin, forehead, and occasionally mouth. For some reason, I was very relaxed, perhaps because I sensed that I was only getting what I deserved. After all, I had feasted on my own glory and egotism for 3 years. The check was bound to come. "Kill him!" I heard Linda Lieben cry. "Kill him!" So Mike reached back and hit me on the side of the head with the hardest punch he had thrown yet. "Give?" he said. I shook my head. "Okay," he said, reaching back to kill me again. He repeated this 8 or 9 times. After each punch, he said, "Give?" And I said, "No," or shook my head, and he reached back again. And then, for an instant, I'd had enough. For one brief moment, the blood of my father and his father's father welled up within me, and I put my hands under Mike's knees, lifted him in the air, held him there, and threw him off me. The crowd gasped, and for a moment Mike looked surprised, even scared. I stood up to my full height in the full height of my pride and dignity, but I did not know what to do next. I was no more willing to fight now than I had been before. And the moment passed, and my fury ebbed, and before I knew it, Mike was on top of me, picking up where he had left off. Soon, I could not distinguish one punch from another, and my ears burned, and the noises around me seemed to be coming from the other end of a hollow tube. I saw glimpses of faces, but I did not see friends or former friends. All I saw was a crowd, and all I heard was a crowd's noise. I knew it was all over: the love notes, the phone calls, the envy and adulation. Each punch robbed me of another friend, another heart, another follower. From here on out, it would just be me and my TV and my memories of glory. And then, one by one, or two by two, the lights went out in my mind, and Mike's legs were around my stomach, and I couldn't breathe. Give, he said. I shook my head. He squeezed harder. Give? Why not? The last light in my mind said, all I'm giving him is the fight. So I gave. I gave him the fight, the love notes, the phone calls, the envy, the adulation, and the arrogant haul of who I had been. For a moment, I felt very light, almost weightless. Okay. All right. So poor Will has been through it. All right. Give me a chance here. I'm going to change screens. And I think I would rather just stretch this out. Okay. So I want to focus on the setting, and to actually focus on our setting, I want you to kind of realize what we're doing here. All right, so I have this little Post-it note, and it's kind of interesting what influenced the setting and how it affects some characters and creates the mood, all right, can really be. All right, so the point of today's lesson, let's always make sure we talk about that first. So today I'm going to teach you that the mood or atmosphere of the setting affects and shapes characters. All right, so once this mood is created, it really can just snowball what happens with other characters and other actions. So I'm going to use this first page of the story primarily to as a mentor text to show you how you could actually do this kind of work. All right, let's maybe bring this down a little bit so it's a little larger. And I want to show everyone that first off, and this is my copy I've written on, there's a part here where they are actually in the gymnasium. All right. It began with a basketball game. Mike Dieter and I went up for the same rebound. I accidentally stuck my elbow in his chest. Then Mike stuck his elbow in my chest. All right. And it kind of goes on, and, you know, they're getting into this kind of scuffle. Okay. So that is one of the primo places that I want to pay attention to. That gymnasium, that setting really started the ball rolling. All right. Okay. Then the next thing that I really thought about is when they were on that sidewalk, and he's not with Mike, he's with his buddy Kevin. And it kind of like shocked me that Kevin didn't support him much. You know, it says, I know I can take him, I said. And he responds, Kevin, he's like, he's 3 inches taller than you, Kevin said. All right. And this dialogue goes back and forth between them. And I know that because there's like a new paragraph, all right, every time somebody else talks. So that kind of showed me another mood, all right, in that setting. And then we get to the part where there's the confrontation in the cafeteria. All right, I hear you want to fight me, he said. That's right, I said. I'm like, oh boy, I'll meet you after school. All right, so that dialogue back and forth again, this time, all right, it's with Mike. All right, so I just used those 3. All right, and you can kind of see here, I did mine on Post-it notes. So we're in the gymnasium, and what's going on with these characters is that they're throwing elbows. And one of them says, I'll fight you. So the mood, if I consider my setting and I think about the actions and what's being said of the characters, then I get my mood, which is ominous, right? That mood is kind of a little, scary, I think, but it's ominous, dark, like something's going to happen. All right. And mood is how the reader feels, right? And we know that that's what's going on. All right. So my second one on the sidewalk, I tell you the setting, what's going on. There's rough talk. There's a banter back and forth. Here they are. Sorry, I'm not much of a drawer. I use my stick figures. I know I can take him. He's 3 inches taller than you. So if I consider my setting and what's going on with the characters, the mood is anxious. Okay? And then the cafeteria. The threat becomes real. I'll meet you after school. Here, the mood is anxious and scared. Probably more scared than just anxious. So this is what I want you to do. You could do it with your own book that you're reading or your own story. Just take a part of it and try to come up with 3 different settings, and consider and, draw a little picture. It can be simple, about what's going on and what do you think the mood is. And this handout will probably help you. Tone is the author's attitude, and you can see that I always use that 1O to turn it into one little person. So that author's one person. And mood, notice I drew a little face with like glasses. The 2 O's in mood are like the reader seeing what's, the words are and what's happening. And that's how I remember the difference. Because I think tone and mood, they're both emotions and feeling, the feeling of what something is like, that setting. But to keep track of the difference, tone is the author's attitude, mood is how the reader feels. And we're focusing on mood. Okay, we are focusing on mood. So there's others. These aren't the only ones, but it could be sad, romantic, peaceful, happy, relaxed, angry, scared, anxious, surprised, guilty, passionate, disappointed, frightened, frustrated, gloomy, sorrowful, joyful, excited, upset, and annoyed. All right, so again, what are you to do? You're going to take your story, or you can take this mentor text and kind of go on to other pages later on if you don't have a story that you're presently in, and you are going to do 3 examples of a setting, what actions and words are going on, and what mood is then created. And we know that once that mood is created, it impacts characters further. Right? It's kind of like a snowball. All right? So that's your job today. Find 3 settings, come up with what's going on with the characters and what mood is being created. And it can be from a story you're reading yourself, right? Or it can be from moving on into the mentor text. See you later. I hope you enjoyed that. And we'll see how fast I can get this moved and turned off. All right.